Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to continue our OpenStreetMap data exploration and visualization project. So we left off last time with basically just getting all of these files, points, and geometry from Houdini via OpenStreetMaps and the Labs OSM plugin. So like I said, we ended right here. The focus of today is going to be on rendering these guys, getting them into a form that we can interact with, and then building some cool effects to get us started. So, if you guys have not followed along with part one, I recommend y'all do that. If you have and you're here, then I won't hold us up any longer, and we can jump into things. So, I think the first thing that I'm going to do is simply visualize my point file. So to do that, we'll drop down a null. I'm going to call that position while I'm at it. And if we remember, I think it's here, in our export from last time, we also had this color, which, right now is just white, but I'm going to grab it anyway and name it color. Then we will use we'll use an add SOP. We will add 1 point, then we will drop down a convert. We will convert that point to particles per point, and then we'll drop a geo. This is a super, where's my geo? This is a super lightweight rendering. So then we'll drop a camera and we'll drop a light. Finally, we'll do a render. And then for our material, we will do a point sprite. And yeah, as I mentioned before, I think in our caustics project, super lightweight rendering, really useful, especially when all we're doing is working with points. And that is going to be the case for this one. So I'm going to call it volume points geo. Turn on instancing. Translate my points. And then give my points a color. And A. So yeah, I guess just to clarify, by dropping this position onto the translate here, then we're assigning each point to the RGB, each point's XYZ value is being looked up using the RGB values of the pixels in this texture and corresponding with the color. You can use the default instance op, but then you kind of have to remember what is mapping to what, so I like to drop them on individually like this. Now you'll see we can start to see our points, but not all of them yet. Before we fix that, I'm going to do a transform, turn on comp over background color, and give us a black background. Now I'll open up my camera, hit H to home us, and we can see now that indeed we got a lot of points, and they are, well, being rendered effectively, but not super aesthetic at the moment. Not super aesthetic. But that's okay. Right now, we just kind of want to get them in here and playing. So, yeah, I'm going to get my camera back, actually, just reset all of its parameters. Just translate it. I find sometimes, personally at least, we can change the far to like 10,000 to give us plenty of distance to view. If you see that blacking out that was happening here, right around here, that is because our camera's far distance is 1,000, and we were exceeding that. So we're going to set that to something huge, like 10,000. That is a common problem. We can go back and continue to zoom us out a little bit. We can rotate us, and well, I guess I shouldn't have done that. Alright, actually, I am just going to leave this here without anything but the translation to, let's call it 2000 flat, and that's fine. I'm just going to leave that. Let's get our geometry going. So buildings first, we can middle mouse and drop a geo, and then I'll just do actually a Fong for the geo. Now that display and render flag are on, we can turn off the display and render for our points for a second. So we can see that our stuff is not rendering. Actually, I think I know what's going on, and that is we actually can see that it's right here, very tiny. That's probably because there's some, I don't know, scaling going on in the vertex export. So I'll scale it up by something like 100. And now we can see that we are able to start looking at our buildings, which is perfect. So yes, again, I believe oh man. This is quite frustrating. Right, now we're getting somewhere. So if we rotate this by 90 degrees, we can see that our geometry is facing each other, which is not really what we want. That's not right. That's not right. Alright, that's correct. So we can move it a bit to get the kind of back ends lined up. Kind of cool though. I kind of like this duality that we have here. Let's cast some light. See these a little different. Give us a better render quality. Whew, much better. Turn our background back on. Alright, we're doing fine. Forget the roads. Okay, so again, we have this distance in between here, and get rid of these transforms. We don't need those, and we do need this one. We can just kind of line them up there by eye. And we can see that looks pretty good. But okay. Alright, so as I was saying, or about to say, we want to keep all these viewports closed so that we are using as few resources as possible. Right now, this is at 45 FPS on my machine, which has a decent card, but I'm also running all the screen recording and about like 6 other projects right now. So hopefully it'll be okay for you guys. If not, you can go back into Houdini, drop the poly count, or do it in Touch with like a poly reduce. But I'm not gonna go into that anymore. If you do have problems with that, feel free to message me and we can figure out a solution so that you guys can keep moving forward. All right, so now these are mirrored images. I don't really want them to be mirrored images, so I kind of want them to be, well, at least have the option of having them oriented the same direction. So I'm going to drop down a math. This is one of the lovely features of working with point clouds as tops. And what I'm going to do is just mask all of the channels except for the blue channel, which is my height, and just multiply that by -1. And now we can see that we're facing the same direction. And so actually, maybe if I just, if I did that, so I actually removed my translate that I added, and now, if maybe we can reduce the alpha, yeah, perfect. So now we can make our buildings transparent or not transparent, and the points are behind them, so you can kind of get this like X-ray view through the buildings. But another cool thing that we can also do is not only X-ray through the buildings, but also if we use this math, you can really start to with the orientation here and how to have some like Inception vibes, which I think I'm probably going to experiment with a little bit. I don't really have this video as scripted as some of the others, so I am kind of doing it more like a live stream and learning as I go with you guys. So maybe at this point it's time for us to start parameterizing some of this. We'll collapse all of that, as always, customize the component. I'm going to call this OSM point viz. Alright, make sure I save this before TouchDesigner crashes on me. Alright, so what are some things that I want to add here? I want to add my point cloud Z multiple, and that will default to -1, and we can make the range like -2 to 2. And our parameters, just drag that to the math, and then we should probably name this math something like Z compression multiple so that we know what it does. We can have another one called building capacity. Default that to 1, and nope, not the point sprite, on the Fong. So now we can, yep, do that, that's great. Alright, so that is getting there. Now, how do we handle the camera being quite unruly? There are a couple solutions. What I'm going to do, actually, before I do that, what I'm going to do is one possible solution, and that is to use a couple cameras and work with some camera animations, actually. So I guess I'll caveat this by saying I'm interested to see what people do with the workflow because I think there are probably some interesting applications of this. But yeah, I'm gonna focus in this bit about I'm gonna focus on trying to render a couple different angles, a couple different views, and animate some transitions between them in a few different ways. So we'll see how much I get through today. All right. First, we have our two cameras, and I want a render pass. I will drop the render onto my render pass. But instead of cam 1, I will use cam 2. And now we can see that we have both of these scenes being rendered almost identically, individually, but identical scene rendered from two magical viewpoints. But to get rid of this, we just need to clear our color and our depth buffers, and that will give us just basically a plain new render canvas, but we get to reuse a lot of the GL overhead for the render setup, which saves us some computation as well. So now, transitioning can be a lot more complicated in this, of course, but it can also be as simple as crossfades. And just like that, we can be crossfading in real time between these two scenes, and that's already a pretty decent step up. All of the scenes look kind of like shit at the moment, so we'll have to see what we can do about that. I think first thing we can probably do is, take down my light. I had it turned way up. You can play with the light settings. You can see this is a cone light right now. We can play with the cone angle and the roll off. So actually, something like this I kind of like. Now, one thing to note is that because our render pass is looking at all of our lights, this is affecting, or both of our renders are, this is affecting both of our render passes, so this is lit differently too. I don't mind at the moment, but it is probably something that we'll come back to, and definitely something worth keeping in mind as you are going through and fine-tuning a lot of this yourself. Now, what are some other things I can do now that my light type has changed? I can try to cast it from a bit of an angle. And can see as we're moving the camera around that we do have light hitting our geometry buildings at different angles, which I kind of like. I also kind of like the fact that the points are showing through a little bit. Kind of gives some depth and adds a little bit of green. And as we remove the buildings, it's kind of like, I enjoy that they disintegrate at different views, and you almost kind of realize all of that negative space was there as the buildings are dissolving. I hadn't noticed that before, but I actually really enjoy the aesthetics there. I think there's also something interesting as the denser areas of points, like right here, really just anything that we're viewing at an angle, especially if there's a lot of detail on the surface. Those are brighter and masked more with the building geometry, which I also think is a nice level of cohesion. So, nope, not that cam, this cam. Alright, so we have this scene, now what? What do we do with it? And we have our transitions, but So what? Alright, so we got our two cameras. Now, how do we animate some transitions besides our crossfade? So one way that we can do that is through using camera blends. So a camera blend, if we set to sequence, and then point our render pass at it, will enable us to actually blend from these two cameras and kind of keep the perspective, which is pretty cool. I like it a lot. And you can have several cameras, so if we want another one, maybe this one, so we have kind of this looking up, we have this one here, maybe this one, what I want is something like, oops, I'll wire it in. We'll put our sequence on 2 so that we can see what's going on as we're doing this. So that could be another one, and then do something very in close and almost just like, yeah, just like that, kind of from this angle. So now our camera is going to sequence from that view to this view, and then to that view, which didn't work super well, and then to this view, which also didn't work super well. Well, I like that, at least. So we have our two cams in our cam blend, and our cam blend will then let us nicely transition these scenes. Might induce a slight amount of motion sickness, but that's okay. Fine tune this one a little bit. Maybe yeah, just like that. Alright, cool. So now we have this. Now I wonder, can I translate it just a little bit, or is that playing with fire? Appears to be playing with not as much fire as I thought. Perfect. So just getting that real nice and lined up perfectly there. And then I guess I'll also move it down, center that in the middle of the screen. So now we have this really nice crisp skyline, just like that. And no. Sorry, I don't want to do any of those things. So we have our nice crisp setup just like this, and our screen blends still work. So that's great. Actually, I'm gonna flip these two so that our scene 1 goes to scene 2 like this. Now our crossfade. What happens if we drop that crossfade onto the sequence? Interesting. Flip those two maybe. Kind of an interesting effect where you kind of see where it's going before you get there. I don't know. Not sure that I like that. Maybe we'll keep the cross separate. Drop that cam blend on our parent parameter. Got our buildings, get the buildings away. And actually, I think the third perspective that I want is going to be, make sure this is wired in. I think the third perspective that I want is going to be, I should have copied this one. And for this, I want it to be a little closer. And I want it to be flatter. A lot more like lifelike and kind of perspective. I don't really like it in that order as much. I'm gonna keep it in the other order, even though I don't love that transition. I think I'll live. Okay, and so now we have a couple different scenes that we can each play with and kind of create some different effects. So one of our first effects, I'm going to stick with sequence spot 1, this guy right here. And for this effect, I think I want to play with this and kind of this cool like buildings being compressed and elastic. So what if I try an LFO with an amplitude of like 4? Down the frequency. Make make sure we turn on blending and transparency. There we go. So I like this. It's kind of cool. What it looks like from our other views. It's kind of under this view too, where you see the points coming up, kind of running into their geometry, and then eclipsing it or not. Kind of thought we should have some light in here though. Maybe an ambient? Oh, that's why. Duh. Our buildings had an opacity of 1. That's why we couldn't see them. Yeah, so that's kind of a cool effect. I like it the most from this level, this angle. And maybe we want to turn off our rendering for our geometry, our building geometry, that is, when we are doing this effect from this view, because I don't really like those buildings appearing there, but I do like them here. Especially at like maybe a lower opacity or something like this, where it's kind of again working with the negative space. Oh, actually, I think that's why everything's looking a little bit funky, and it's somewhat annoying, but I believe that our geometry is probably facing away from us. But maybe I'll just leave that for now. So first things first, how to set this off when we are changing our view. So we really don't want it. Maybe we can probably take this transition as a point to turn off the geometry viewing without really having much notice. So what we can do is a parameter execute. I'll put up here. And then this parameter execute, we'll point it at our parent component, and then the parameter point cloud zmult, and then, oh no, not that parameter, on the parameter sequence. We'll say if par.name equals sequence, double equals for logical equal sign, then we want to take our op geo buildings dot render and turn that to false. Except par dot eval equals 1. And no attribute render, okay. And also I forgot to rename the op, so we should call this first geo buildings so that that's there. But then what we should also do is go to our documentation. And in the documentation, find the flags that we need. Maybe something called render. Get or set render flag. Okay. So actually it is called render, which means maybe it was just because I didn't have that name right. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So if I turn on our geo buildings and then we turn our sequence to 1, watch carefully, and there, it turns off. So now we can say if it changes and it does not equal 1, then we can turn it back on. Just like that. So now, I believe, when we move this back down, we have our buildings, no buildings, buildings, no buildings. And so that's pretty handy. Now, let's say we didn't want to render these buildings at all, or we wanted to have more control over them. What we could do is, in this render, here, actually just dump in our points only to this guy. And then, well, it's kind of going to mess up our multiples. Okay, so we won't do that. What we'll do actually is drop another render pass. Now you have to drop the most recent one in the render chain to it. So this render goes to this render pass, goes to this render pass. There we are going to take, oops, yeah, we can do our cam blend, but we'll do just our point geometry. And then all of our lights. And here we are already clearing our depth and camera buffers, but that's good. We want to make sure we do that. And then we can call this render points only. And now it's an easy way for us to render just the points. And so now we can use another cross. Just turn this like that. We can use another cross to control our building and whether or not they're appearing. So this gives us quite a lot of flexibility as far as when these guys are shown or not. Which is pretty cool. So what else can we do? Alright, well this LFO is kind of annoying because well, it's just boring, I guess. So that's fine. I'm gonna time slice the noise. Make the exponent pretty small. Make the the period huge. Math. Actually, I wanted this to all be added together. So we'll take the math, combine my chops using add. Put this back in here. See if that helps us a little bit. And then amplitude for offset. I'm going to make the offset 1 and the amplitude 3 so that it's a little bit skewed to, actually, the other way. I want it negative 1 and 3 so that it's a little bit skewed to being right way up. And then I'm going to do an audio device in. And this will be my microphone that I'm using for this tutorial. We can do a audio filter, low pass, that's fine, and then we can do an analyze and RMS power, and then we can do a trail to see what we're looking at. And so you can see here, this is basically what we're looking at. It's analyzing pretty well, and there's definitely, changes as I'm speaking. Now, this is an audio analysis tutorial, so I'm basically just going to hack this from here, but there's plenty of great audio analysis tutorials out there already, so I encourage you to check those out. I'm just going to try and focus on some quick audio reactivity, maybe when there's a very loud noise and we get above, say, 0.10. So then what I can do is use an envelope like this. And I'll feed a trigger into it. Trigger threshold will be 0.1. And then we can use this. Pardon me, I'm going to simply clean up this network a little bit. So we have, these are our camera scenes. Render. Alright, so we got the render there. By the way, Alt, click and drag to make these boxes. Point cloud. Then this will be building geo. Have my point cloud geo. Cloud geo. Alright, cool. So now this is a little bit more orderly. Stressing me out a bit. Okay, so now back to where we were, and that is using this audio reactivity. So I'm just going to add in a noise. The output is going to be input plus noise. We'll turn dithering on, monochrome off, and then 32-bit float. And we can see that the amplitude will indeed scatter our points in 3D space, which is pretty cool. You can probably see where we're going with this now. I'm going to drag and drop my envelope onto my amplitude. And so now, this isn't working too well. Right, maybe 1 plus 5 times envelope. And now, we can see that we have some audio reactive stuff going on with our particles, and as I'm speaking, they're becoming more and more distorted. In addition, we'll have this kind of Z compression, accordion style point movement going, and we have the ability to bring our buildings in or not in as we choose. Now, if I bring our Z multiple back to -1 and have our building showing, here we can see that just the pure audio reactivity of the noise points, of the noised locations for our points becomes a little bit more clear as I'm talking. I think my envelope is probably a little wide, so I'll make it a little bit smaller. And then potentially didn't do best practice and did not use a null. That was a mistake. 1 + 5 times. And then that's what I don't want. I don't want an attack length on my trigger. But what I do want is for that trigger to just fade out a little bit. So I think I'm pretty happy with this, but I'm going to have all of this down. So now we have a little bit more, we have a little bit more of a smooth kind of audio reactive. It's really not quite working the way I want it to. Okay, reset all of those parameters. All right. Yeah, okay. So maybe I can move the trigger down just a little bit. It might be slightly high, but I don't want it too low. Like I said, not an audio analysis tutorial, so I'm going to stop there, I think. This is already getting pretty long as far as tutorials go, so I think we're going to pause here, and we can pick it up next time and kind of just keep going here. What we're going to look at doing is developing a couple of our other scenes, adding some color and animation, and converting our kind of static, or a little bit animated but more or less static points into a particle system that may be able to actually move and take on some behaviors. So with that, I will say thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Your guys' support continually means a ton to me. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you guys next time.